Hello and welcome to Watching the Big Picture with your host Rajat Kane. In next half hour, we'll discuss how the EPF, an essential component of savings and pension in Indian middle class and working class, gets redefined after recent orders of Kerala High Court and which was later confirmed by Supreme Court this week. Early this week, the Supreme Court dismissed a plea filed against Kerala High Court order that had asked Employees Provident Fund Organisation to provide pension to all retiring employees, rather than capping the figure to Rs 15,000 per month. In effect, all retiring employees will now get pension on the full salary instead of Rs 15,000 cap. In September last year, a division bench of Kerala High Court had nullified the amendments made to the Employees Pension Scheme in 2014 after a detailed hearing upon as many as 507 petitions filed by various organizations and individuals challenging the EP Amendment Scheme of 2014. According to the new rules of 2014, new employees who had earned more than the capped wages, that means Rs 15,000, would not be eligible for EPS. The bench, comprising Chief Justice of India Ranjan Gogoi, Justice Deepak Gupta and Justice Sanjeev Khanna, dismissed plea filed by EPFO, saying that it finds no merit in the special leave petition and hence restoring the orders passed by the Kerala High Court. To discuss more on this important subject, we are joined with a guest in the studio, Mr. A.K. Bhattacharya, Editorial Director, Business Standard, Mr. R.K. Kukreja, former Additional Central Provident Fund Commissioner, and Mr. Jayandas Gupta, former Ambassador, WTO. Thanks all of you for joining us. Mr. Kukreja, I would like to start with you. EPF, Provident Fund, is essential part of Indian middle class and working class and salaried class. Could you simplify this, what exactly EPF means and how that becomes part of his savings for our viewers to start the discussion with?
The Employees Provident Fund and Miscellaneous Provisions Act 1952 was promulgated in the year 1952. Initially, the Act empowered the central government to frame the Provident Fund scheme. Thereafter, the Employees Family Pension Scheme and the Employees Deposit Link Insurance Scheme were also added in the Act, and the schemes were framed by the central government and implemented by the Employees Provident Fund organization. In the year 1995, the government promulgated an ordinance for implementation of the Employees Pension Scheme.
Right.
After that, an amendment was made to the Act by inserting a Section 6A in the Employees Provident Fund and Miscellaneous Provisions Act 1952. By virtue of this provision of the Act 6A, Section 6A, the central government was empowered to frame a pension scheme, and it was specifically mentioned that the employer's contribution out of that 8.33% will be diverted to the pension fund. The pension scheme was framed. The pension scheme was initially applicable to the employees, those who were drawing basic wages up to 6,500. Thereafter, the basic wages were increased to 15,000.
Right.
From 1st September 2014, an amendment was made in the Employees Pension Scheme, wherein certain changes were made in the pension scheme, and a cap was put on the persons to draw the pensioner benefits up to 15,000. It was also made in that amendment that if the persons, those who are drawing salary more than 15,000, if they also want to become a member of the pension scheme, then the contribution which was earlier being made by the government, which is 1.16%, that too will be borne by the employee.
Right.
As just now it has been told to you that the Kerala High Court has basically nullified the notification issued by the government, which has amended the Employees Pension Scheme. And the Supreme Court, after hearing the petition
Right.
on filed by the Employees Provident Fund Organization as yesterday said that they do not want to say anything. They have considered, they have learned, heard the Learned Council of the EPFO. They have gone through the records, and on merits, they do not find anything to change.
Right. Change as in the Kerala High Court's order.
So they have sustained the Kerala High Court.
Right. Mr. Das Gupta, how important do you think was court's intervention, or for that matter, Kerala High Court order in terms of simplifying PF for employees?
I think we need to be clear about a few facts. And one of the things is that the Employees Provident Fund scheme is mandatory for employees drawing a basic wage of 15,000 rupees per month. If they draw above that and they still want to be a part of the EPF, then a joint representation has to be made to the Assistant Provident Fund Commissioner by the employee and the employer, because the employer and the employee make a contribution of 12% each. And the 12% which the employer makes, out of that 8.33 goes to the pension fund and 3.67 goes to the EPF. Now, there are many organizations which are also exempted from this under the guidelines of the EPFO. So the point that was upheld by the Honorable Kerala High Court and has been since then, the petition of the EPFO has been disposed of by the Honorable Supreme Court. That is that there were many employees who had been making a contribution, and the employers had been making a matching contribution without taking the approval of the Assistant Provident Fund Commissioner.
Right.
And this was not getting recorded anywhere. So this is the problem. It is basically about subscribing to the EPF. Employees who are not subscribing to the EPF, they are not going to get this benefit. Only if the employer was also making a contribution, that would be taken as tacit acceptance of the scheme, and that is what the honorable courts have upheld. That you then can't put this upper ceiling of 15,000.
Right.
Now, there is another point which needs to be mentioned in this context. There is an SLP, I understand, I am open to correction, of the Union of India, which is the administrative ministry, the Ministry of Labour of the Government of India, which is pending disposal before the Honorable Supreme Court. So, that till the disposal of that petition, it will not be final as to what happens to the Honorable Kerala High Court's judgment.
Right. Mr. Bhattacharya, just discussing the Supreme Court order further, you think it's a far-reaching order, it will have far-reaching consequences?
Well, yes, I think it will have far-reaching consequences going forward. Now, two principles need to be understood which the Honorable Supreme Court of India has actually underlined in this judgment. Number one is that if the employer and the employee agree to contribute and enter into a kind of a compact with the permission obtained of the EPFO, then capping their pension is not an option.
Okay.
And that seems to be there, but then its impact will be felt going forward, because 2014, I think if I am not wrong, the Supreme Court's order even here makes it clear that those who may have given the option till 2014, when the law was amended, they will continue to enjoy this benefit. And the number two is that there are a large number of companies which do not administer their own, they allow their Employees Provident Fund corpus to be administered by their trusts. I think this Supreme Court order has made it very clear that the enforceability of 2014 with proper acceptance by both the employer and employee would be applicable also to those categories of companies which be maintaining their own EPF accounts through trusts. A large number of many companies, large companies, actually maintain their own trusts to administer their EPFs.
Right.
My sense is that this Supreme Court order will clarify all doubts about it, whether this law applies to them as well or not.
Right, right.
And my final point would be that at a time when long-term savings and pension benefits are being considered for even the unorganized sector employees with a cap of 3,000 rupees per month, whereas the EPFO pension, the cap is lower. So I think the Supreme Court intervention at this point in time is also seems to me politically very correct and appropriate, because you cannot have a scenario in which the EPFO pension, the cap is lower than the unorganized sector pension, though the unorganized sector pension will kick in many years later. But the fact of the matter is this, that you cannot have a situation where the organized sector pension is more than the organized sector pension.
Right. Mr. Kukreja, I mean, I would like to ask one thing. What was the rationale of having 15,000 rupees cap, and why it was necessitated that this was required to be done?
In my opinion, the employees' pension scheme was basically for the employees, those who are having less salary. Whereas in exempted establishments or in bigger establishments, or the employees those who are drawing salary, very high salary, the government is of the opinion that they shall manage their own pension for their old age as an old age benefit to them. That's how the government had framed the new pension scheme, where everyone is eligible to become a member, make a contribution, and after that he will be able to choose even the investment plan also. And according to the investment plan, he can draw his pension.
Right, right. Mr. Dasgupta, how important are pensions and EPF in the earning scenario? And especially if we need to simplify this further, these orders, how important they will be for that particular class who actually live off the savings?
The basic policy objective for the EPFO itself or the EPF scheme is that workers who are basically shop floor workers, not part of the management, they would not be in a position to plan for their savings in such a manner that they get a corpus and then they can draw on that corpus when they retire from work.
Right.
So this ceiling of 15,000 and this the pension ceiling of 7,500 upon serving for a maximum of 35 years, which was built into the new pension scheme, both will have to go. If the Honorable Supreme Court has said that this 15,000 ceiling will not work, we have to study the actual judgment, because if it applies only to people who had crossed the 15,000 ceiling but whose employers were also making an equal contribution but it was not getting reflected in the EPF records, that is one thing. If it is of a far greater implication that the EPFO ceiling of 15,000 itself should be raised, that is a different issue. But be that as it may, I think when we are all seeing sea change in our thinking,
right.
We have this universal basic income concept getting debated for people who are below the poverty line. We are seeing benefits which are going to the unorganized sector. So I think the government also needs to formulate a modern progressive looking policy for pension for the organized sector as well.
You mean to say that there is a requirement of a rethink on the EPF? You mean to say?
Depending on the implications of the central of the Honorable Supreme Court, the government may have to reformulate the scheme in such a manner that it abides by the Supreme Court's judgment, and it also provides benefits to the employees while not putting an onerous burden on the employers.
Right.
Because at the moment the government's contribution is 1.16%, which is restricted only up to 15,000 rupees per month. Above that, the employer pays that contribution also. So there would be a rethink involved.
Sir, are these EPF slabs far too complicated or complex to understand, which is why court's intervention was necessary? Is there a reformulation really required on this, or as they happens to be an extremely essential part of income for a certain working class or middle class to say of, or rather majority of middle class, so it should stay the way it is?
No, I would not say they are complicated, but they are certainly framed in a way that the employer's liability in particular is capped. For example, the law is framed in such a way that it gives the employers the option of capping its contribution at a salary level which is of 15,000, or earlier it was 6,500 or whatever that figure was. So I think in my view there are two things that I would recommend. That one is that if the employer and the employee agree to allocate a sum of a share of their total earnings for the provident fund purposes, I think the full benefit should accrue to the employee. Now, but the challenge there would be, how does the EPFO manage to invest that money in instruments that give you the kind of returns that can provide pensionary benefits over a long period of time? Already the government's pension scheme is facing a kind of a question mark, because of the government's financial burden is increasing with every passing year, with the average, the longevity increasing. The estimate is that either the end of this year or next year, the central government's total pension bill will be as much as its wage bill. So therefore, if the responsibility of providing pensionary benefits to the employees in the private sector, the organized sector, that goal has to be achieved, then I would imagine we need an organization that is more open and more, of course, regulation has to be there, but I think it's a very conservative organizational structure, wherein...
You mean the EPFO is?
EPFO, okay. Because even if it wants to secure returns for the investment it makes, there are prudent regulatory clauses that are in place. For example, they cannot invest more than right now 5% of the entire corpus in the capital market. Now it is sought to be raised to 15%, but the question is EPFO geared to making the employees and the employers' salary contribution for the PF purposes judiciously, properly, and without exposing them to risks? Now, these are very, very important issues. We also haven't really made enough efforts to invite foreign pension funds to come into this country and invest here. So I think the entire pension area requires a lot of reform, and I don't think we have done that. For example, why is it that the private sector employees should only be contributing their pension or their PF only to one organization? Why should not there be a competition of sorts between 2 or 3 organizations trying to secure more money from these companies?
Okay.
So I think we need a reform in this entire provident fund sector. where reforms in the other parts have taken place, and I don't think enough reforms, adequate reforms have taken place in the provident fund sector.
Mr. Kukreja, you also think that going ahead times, possibly EPFO requires some reforms or reformulation of certain policies concerning PF and pension?
Yes, I should say that EPFO has already gone a long way in improving itself, its services.
Right.
EPFO has already introduced a universal account number so that when a person changes his job, he need not get a new number and his contributions are not required to be transferred from one establishment account to another establishment account. Similarly, EPFO is also going forward in settlement of claims, that is online settlement of claims. So EPFO is improving its functioning, as well as I would like to say that certainly they have to now look forward for the policy formulations also. Just now it has been said that as far as pension is concerned, now it is becoming a big financial burden.
Yes.
And it is the real social security. If we say real social security, then Provident Fund is not the social security, it is the pension, which is the monthly payment to a person, that is the social security. And now people are very conscious, and I think everybody is now looking forward for a pension scheme. So EPFO will have to come forward with a policy formulation in regard to the pension scheme also.
Mr. Dasgupta, as you just mentioned, in fact, you just dropped it that there is time for reformulation. So if one may ask you, what is those salient point in the policy changes that you would like to see in EPFO sector?
I think part of it has been alluded to by Mr. Bhattacharya.
Yes.
The EPFO has hitherto been investing, I think the rate of interest which is paid to the EPF contributors is about 8.55%. It keeps varying. But it is basically derived by making investments in fixed income securities. Okay. Now, it was 5% which was invested in the bonds, in the mutual funds, and I think it is getting raised, or it's already been raised to 15%. But the EPFO is basically an organization which was designed to keep track of the EPF accounts, to calculate the interest and to make smooth payments, easy payments to the employees. Now, that role cannot then take on the responsibility of being an investment manager also. That has to be taken up by a separate organization, which is a professional organization and which keeps doing this kind of a thing.
You mean to say that EPFO has too much on its plate and it needs to be balanced?
In the case of the government also, with effect from I think 1st of October 2004, the pension scheme has been discontinued in the central government, and it is getting invested through various kinds of instruments. So it has been handed over this function to a specialized organization. So the EPFO may also have to look at doing things if indeed employees who are drawing much more than 15,000 rupees are also eligible for pensions, and the number of EPF account holders also increases substantially, then I am sure it would become quite unmanageable for the present structure of the EPF to do this, to do justice to this, and to assure of a fixed kind of an assured return on the contribution made.
Right, right. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. It's indeed enlightening to know all these salient points of changes required in the EPF sector of India, and plus also the Supreme Court order, which has confirmed the Kerala High Court order. It will also have far-reaching consequences in the future. Thanks for joining Bharati TV and watching Big Picture.
Thank you.
Thank you.